Joining us now for more on the potential impact of antitrust action, Inside.com founder and CEO Jason Calacanis. Jason, good morning. Happy to have you back with us. Now, as an angel investor, you back companies that you must believe can compete against the tech giants. Why do you think that some of these mega caps need to be reined in or broken up?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I've been thinking about, is really just three questions. Like, why is this happening now? Because it's clearly happening. This is a level of intensity that we've never seen. We've talked about antitrust for the last decade, and I think we've had more activity in the last 6 months than we did in that decade. And what the outcome will be is the second thing I've been thinking about, and then how does it affect me as an early stage investor? I think the why it's happening is super important for tech to consider. Obviously, we have wealth disparity in the country, privacy issues, and the tax avoidance issues. But I really think the impact on the elections, both for the Democrats and the Republicans, were very acute and very scary for politicians. And that's why this has become, I think, the only issue that Democrats and Republicans agree on, which is big tech is too powerful. The Democrats feel Hillary didn't get into office because of the Russians and Facebook. And then, people are blaming Trump's loss and Trump being out of the public square on Twitter. So I think that's why it's happening. Now, what actually it results in and how it affects my business, those are the second order questions I'm really thinking about.
Right. And they certainly agree, both sides, but how to regulate them, how to execute that is very different. Jason, I know that you know Keith Rabois, fellow VC. He was on with us yesterday.
Yeah, I heard him yesterday.
He said this is clearly happening. Yeah, he does not agree with you. He says that there is no techlash. It's actually fabricated and there's no need for regulation. What do you say to that?
Okay, so there's two different issues. What he's talking about is consumers are delighted right now. When you go buy an Amazon Basics cable for $5 or $6 and you don't feel like you're getting price gouged by, an Apple Store $30 cable, that's a delightful feeling. The fact that Twitter, Facebook, and all these services, photo services are free, that is awesome for consumers. So consumers are not feeling loss in the moment. So now we have to take antiquated laws that do not really apply to these companies, and companies that are so sophisticated, they kind of know how to route around consumer harm. You just make products free or you keep making them cheaper. So you kind of win that argument. But I think what Keith was not addressing is the sentiment in the country. And that's equally important. The fact that there's wealth disparity, the fact that people feel their privacy is being invaded and that they don't have control of their data, and they look at the tax avoidance by these big companies, those things have given, I think, a lot of ammunition to politicians who were totally delighted with these companies until those politicians felt like, wow, if they can take Trump off all the platforms and take away all his power, well, they could do that to me. I think that's actually what's causing this to happen right now.
Right.
These politicians are looking at it going, whoa, this is too much power.
Yeah, Jason, I've been skeptical of some of these antitrust actions because I'm not sure that they're all framing monopoly and monopoly power in exactly a logical and reasonable way. And I think a judge came down on that side of it a couple weeks ago. But I don't see what Biden is doing here as antitrust. I look at some of these things, right to repair, that's good for consumers. Marketplaces and barring unfair methods of competition. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. Data, rules on surveillance and data accumulation. I mean, you don't have to be a monopoly for that to protect consumers. So a lot of that's good. But this on M&A and greater scrutiny of acquisitions, even of small companies, that seems to me like the thing that could really damage the ecosystem potentially. Because, I mean, back when Facebook bought Instagram, Instagram was tiny. It was like a dozen people. I find it hard to imagine what the argument would have been to prevent that acquisition.
Yeah, this is a super astute point, John. Like, the acquisition area is a way you could really ankle these big companies because they're used to being able to buy or build anything innovative that comes into the marketplace. Now, is that going to be good for consumers, or is it going to be good for venture capitalists, early stage investors like myself, and for founders? The argument that it's good is that we would see another dozen buyers exist in the market. We always want companies as investors to go for the gold, to go for the IPO, and to be large independent concerns. It would have been great for YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, Android, any number of these companies to become independent companies, because then you have more buyers. Then you have more of a marketplace. Now, the prices might be somewhat muted because you don't have $2 and $3 trillion companies, but there's going to be more buyers, which means more stocks that you can buy from, and which means a more dynamic marketplace. And so I think that's actually the outcome that will happen. And I think we're going to see companies start opting into that to get ahead of this. Here's
a potential problem that I see also, though, is if you don't have, as an investor, the potential exit option of getting bought by one of these big companies, there are some good startups that won't survive, right? They won't be able to get those follow-on rounds of funding. It'll be like, well, do you have the runway that I can see to become a public company in the near term or not? And if not, isn't something that might happen sort of junking these companies, stripping them down for parts? A company like Apple or like Facebook could say, I want the talent and I'm not going to buy the company?
I'm going to disagree on this one. I think what's going to happen is you'll have Amazon Web Services spin out. If you theoretically had Instagram spin out and YouTube, let's just pick that. Now you've got 3, additional tech giants out there.
But I'm not talking about more buyers. I'm not talking about the spin outs. I'm talking about if you can't buy, if the big company can't buy the little company to begin with. Right? Isn't it harder
we don't seem to have a liquidity problem right now.
Right now.
I'll be totally honest. We have a lot of people who want to dip down. And with SPACs, and with direct listings, I think the more likely scenario that we'll see is these companies like an Instagram or a YouTube be able to go public in year 5, 6, or 7. And so while we need to be cautious about SPACs, not all are created equal, not all have great people bringing them out, and it's not all great product. This could be actually amazing for our industry. Like the PC industry, when I was growing up, Lotus 1, 2, 3, or some of these companies being independent, not being built inside of Microsoft, not being built inside of a Google. So I think it's going to create a much more vibrant space, and it's going to create more companies and more transactions. Will they be smaller? Possibly. But I think what we're going to see is some of these big tech giants are going to spin out some companies, and then they're going to take some preemptive action. And there might be some negotiation going on in the back end here about, hey, you can't put politicians, no matter how poorly they act, in timeout indefinitely. And maybe you guys should pay some taxes and stop offshoring all your IP.
You're an early Robinhood investor, so I wanted to ask you about the upcoming IPO and what newer investors need to know. The S1 letter highlights that most of Robinhood users are long-term buy and hold investors, but is that kind of investor good for Robinhood's business?
Yeah, I think and I have no inside information. I am an angel investor from before the product even was in market. So just to be clear, I don't have inside information. I don't have information rights. I'm not on the board of the company and certainly don't speak for the company. So very similar to the Uber situation. That being said, what's very unique about this company in this moment in time is we have a generation, really 2, millennials and Gen Z, who are growing up with a level of financial literacy that is greater than any. Hold on, let me finish, Deirdre. Deirdre, you got to let me finish. The issue here is this group of people is going to be so sophisticated when they get into the 30s and 40s, and I think that's why they're growing so significantly.
Right. So I think you're saying that ultimately they will be sort of longer term, more educated investors. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, when you start playing poker or blackjack. Let me just read you some of the numbers, though. Well, hold on. When you start playing any game and you're learning any skill
for Robinhood,
when you're learning any new skill, you start at the kiddie table and you play $1 or $2 blackjack, and then you learn it.
Yes.
And I think that's what's happening in crypto right now, and I think that's what's happening in the stock market. There are people who are casually playing with money they would have gambled with. What's that?
I'm just asking you for longer term, for people thinking about buying into this IPO. The longer term thesis here is Robinhood, when you get down to it, when you look at the numbers, which we finally got in the S1, is that the profit maximizing move is to encourage short-term trading, options and crypto trading.
I think that's the nature of, people who are using the app today, a number of them. And then as you get older, your goals change. You're not trying to make money, for this year or enjoying the act of buying stocks and shorting stocks and doing calls. And then maybe you're saving for a home or a kid's college plan, and you'll maybe go into longer term things or even use a different app like Wealthfront, which we happen to be shareholders in, which is a set it and forget it app. So there'll be both of these options. Some people like to bet on sports. Some people like to bet on sports. Some people like to bet on crypto. Some people like to day trade. Other people like to buy index funds. I'm in that last category.
Yeah,
I just buy
absolutely.
index funds.
I just wonder which. There you go. Okay. Jason, we'll continue this conversation. I know you and I have talked about Tether as well. We've asked some of the executives there to come on. We'll continue to ask for it, right, Jason?
Yeah, I guess they're not
Jason
returning our
Calacanis.
calls. Seems very Theranos-like.
All right.
I don't know about that, but we'll talk more about this.
Like to ask some questions. Always good to have Jason.